Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video, I'd like to discuss the latest poll bonanza in the Mail on Sunday, which, despite being a Conservative backing media outlet, makes very grim reading for the Tories in general and Boris Johnson in particular. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, polls, and damned polls. Have to be careful, of course. For example, the Daily Mail ran a poll about the government's Rwanda brain fart and claimed that respondents were in favour of the plan. However, they deliberately misled their readers as to what the plan was. They told people taking part in the poll that the plan was to send asylum seekers to Rwanda in order to have their claims dealt with and then brought back if successful. And even though that is still an insane plan, that's not what the plan is. Just as well, because as I say, even more bonkers than the real plan. If we want to deal with their claims offshore, France have said, well, why don't you build a facility there to sort it out? They're fine with that. No, the plan is just to transport asylum seekers around it. That's it. That's the plan. Human trafficking is what the plan is. So yes, beware of polls in any newspaper. But when a poll seems to present a view that the media outlet would rather people not hold, then it becomes more interesting. So if the Mail on Sunday had a poll that said the Conservatives are going to romp to victory at the next election, it may well be a valid poll, but you'd be rightly extra sceptical. This poll doesn't do that. For a start, it has Labour 9 points ahead overall. Now, personally, I think that's over-egging it a bit. I think the gap's a bit high there. I think they're not adequately taking account of the people who are saying who they would vote for, but probably won't actually vote at all. But never mind. But then they break down a few areas that can form the basis for people's voting intention. Because although there are a lot of issues at stake during a general election, plenty of swing voters, and they're the important ones, will make their decision based on a single factor. It could be which party will run the economy better. This poll shows that the economy is the second most important issue for respondents. A distant second to the cost of living, but still second. The same poll also shows that Labour have an 8-point lead on which would be best with the economy. So people not really feeling it with the so-called party of economic responsibility. They're also unimpressed with the Chancellor personally. Rishi Sunak, the man who was the most popular frontline politician on either side of the House of Commons recently, by some distance as well, is now toxic in public. Nearly 2/3 of respondents thinks he is doing badly. It's not like this clears the path for Liz Truss either. 41% think she's doing badly to only 32% thinking she's doing well. Also, despite people thinking that Sunak is doing badly, the poll results still show him as the favourite to succeed Johnson, should he be made to step down. Not that he's way out in front, it's just that it just goes to show the Conservatives don't really have anyone seen as a credible replacement that is popular. There was a fella being interviewed on a programme last week. I saw a clip of it. And he was explaining why Boris Johnson is unfit and why he needs to step down, why he needs to be replaced. And then the presenter asked him, so bearing in mind he'd have to be replaced by a Conservative MP, who would be best? And the fella said, it's a little bit like being asked what your favourite flavour of animal poo is. And that's sort of where people are, and that's what this poll shows. It's like people realise that it's not working with Boris Johnson, but then they look at the credible replacements and go, maybe them? No, maybe, I don't know. And that's the only good news for Boris Johnson, really, in the entire poll. The poll is wall-to-wall bad news for him. If he's to take any succour from it at all, it's that his party is coming out of the exercise badly, but at least people are blaming everyone, not just him. Speaking of Johnson, how is he doing personally? Because some people will make voting choice about the leader. And it's not as silly as I make it sound. At the end of the day, although we have a parliamentary democracy, unfortunately, and this is part of the problem with the education system, we don't teach people how our democracy works, which is why it's so easy to attack. A lot of people behave like we have a presidential democracy. And it's easy to see why. After all, Boris Johnson is ruling Parliament, isn't he? His MPs keep voting to give him more of their own power. What sort of legislative assembly votes to give themselves less power? Unless it's for the purpose of devolution to better reflect regional needs. But this is the reverse. This is taking away their power to concentrate it into an individual. That's going back to absolute monarchy. That's not progress. But people will approach the general election not so much on a party basis, many will do that, but on a personality basis. They will imagine that the Prime Minister is like a president, and they'll decide which of the two of them, of the realistic choices they have, they would prefer. And that's why, Tory MPs really want Boris Johnson to get through these scandals, because they sort of see him as the greater personality. But the latest poll shows Keir Starmer 7 points ahead of Johnson. The mighty Boris Johnson, the great personality, this cartoon-like appeal to the masses, is seen as an inferior choice to Keir Starmer. Maybe people have decided being dependable is perhaps a better trait for a Prime Minister than the class clown. The big standout in the poll is the cost of living crisis, though. 69% cited it as one of the most important problems facing people. Then another interesting result. Question, have you made any changes due to the cost of living increase? 70% said they had. Now that's quite serious for the Conservatives, because the cost of living is not just something that people are talking about and think is a serious matter, like the economy. Like when it comes to the economy, it often features as one of the most important things. People will say, oh yeah, absolutely, the economy is the most important thing. And it is. But the average voter sort of knows economic management is important, but they've got no idea whether that management is good or bad. They'll just go with whatever their echo chamber tells them. But if people have had to actually change their behaviour due to the rising cost of living, that means they've had to downgrade their standard of living. And 70%. Yes, some will be doing without a few luxuries. Maybe they not have a takeaway every week or something. That a lot of people would not consider that important. That's not a big deal, is it? But it is all relative, isn't it? If 70% of people have felt the need to take measures to downgrade their standard of living, then they will be particularly interested in what both the government and the intended government in waiting have to say about it. And the Conservatives are saying, well, nothing more can be done. That's not a great strategy when Labour are saying, actually, there's plenty we would do, and then they're explaining some of the methods simply and clearly. Now, when it comes to issues like this, the Tories could normally think, well, the election's not for like 2.5 years if we leave it until the last minute, and this might blow over. For some issues, that absolutely is the case. That's their standard operating, modus operandum, really. If you're going to be really unpopular for something, make it well before the election, then you can get away with it. But the cost of living crisis is not a flash in the pan. It's not just now. It's going to get worse later this year. And why wouldn't it continue to get worse next year as well with the path we're on? Despite the various factors that the Conservatives blame for the situation, the fact is it's their policies that are chiefly to blame. So while Rishi Sunak remains in place, it doesn't seem likely that those policies would change. And even if Sunak is replaced, it doesn't seem likely that the policies would improve. They will change, but not improve. What I'm saying is that this problem, that is the runaway top issue for people, is still going to be around come the next election, even if they wait until the last possible moment. So then you look at what the Tories want to counter with. So they need to distract us, and that's what they're trying to do. Well, made up immigration and asylum problems. Yet somehow, these extremely expensive immigration solutions to the made up problems, that's what they're countering with. But look else, what the poll says. Only 7% think immigration and asylum are an important issue. Then you think to yourself, of those 7% who think it's a top issue, because remember on this poll, it wasn't, it's quite tricky because I haven't seen exactly how it was phrased and the raw data. But the question implies that people could select more than one. So it wasn't asking people what their top issue was. It was, because in theory you could say, well, it might be that only 7% thought asylum and immigration was the top issue, but maybe a load of them thought it was second issue. The question suggests they could have ticked more than one. So only 7% think it's even a serious issue. And not all of those 7% are thinking it's an issue in the same way the Conservatives would like to frame it. Many of them think it's a top issue because we need to adopt a more compassionate and above all legal attitude to asylum. So not all of those 7% will be impressed with the government's take. It may be that fewer than half of those 7% are. Some will inevitably think it's important for us to approach it in the other way. Then there's the attempts to make trans rights a hot potato for Labour. And indeed, the Mail on Sunday is totally on board with this. The poll contains a very prominent question on this. But only 1% consider it to be a top issue. And in fact, I think that's rounded up. So on the face of it, neither immigration or trans rights, two of the key foci of the Tory culture wars right now, are going to be big issues at the election, unless the Conservatives can somehow engineer a greater emphasis. But like I said before Brexit, people will have all sorts of very fixed ideas on lots of areas of political philosophy and may well even use their votes to express them, but only when their life is otherwise fine. When their own standard of living is hit in a way that they realise is hit, all of a sudden what are abstract issues for a lot of people disappear. People focus on their own immediate predicament, and that predicament is struggling to pay for the standard of living that they either expect or have been used to. And that's just in terms of general government. Personal behaviour seems to be important as well. On the question of whether Partygate had made people feel differently about the Conservatives, 62% said it made them look less favourably on them. Note that this isn't less favourable views of Johnson, Sunak or any other individual. This is of the Conservatives generally. Partygate is hurting their party image. Tory MPs may still hope this issue blows over. Maybe it will be lessened in time for many. But I still think it'll be very raw for those most directly affected for years to come. And people are still being very badly affected by it because 2,000 people a week at the moment still are dying of COVID. But the cost of living, the issue of the day, isn't going away, is it? They keep insisting in throwing tens of billions of pounds to their mates and donors. They still keep insisting on not taxing those easily be able to afford it. They also keep insisting on selling off national assets, making them less effective and more costly. So yeah, the cost of living crisis is going nowhere. Their usual strategy for this would be to say, yeah, but it'll be even worse under Labour. But according to this poll, people don't think it will be. Finally, people don't seem to be falling for Johnson's Churchill impression with the Ukraine crisis either. More are happy with his performance than not, but there's no majority thinking he's doing well. But again, only 15% think it has made them think more favourably about the Conservatives. Now, unless that paltry 15% covers their target voters in target seats, which seems unlikely, then they're not getting the hoped-for boost from the Ukraine war either. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. I hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.